And I just want to real quick just introduce what we're doing here tonight and where this idea came from. As you can probably tell by now, you can hear a little bit of an accent coming out of my mouth. The reason for that being is I'm originally not from around here. I grew up in Eastern Europe in the country of Hungary. And, when I moved over to the United States technically around 2010-ish. And remember moving over to the States, there was quite a few things that were quite appealing to me about the United States of America. And the core values of the U.S., especially, freedom and integrity, and just. But I guess more than that, it was that this country was founded and based on biblical principles, which is very unique. I'm kind of a history guy, and I was just that's just always stood out to me about the U.S. that the founding fathers of this country really established this nation and the Constitution based on biblical principles. The first pilgrims, the Christians. Who were persecuted in Europe coming over, they set things up based on a biblical worldview. And moving forward, fast forward to today, if you look at our nation, you start to notice that it's kind of unfortunate that our nation has started to drift more and more away from those biblical principles. And I remember I was in prayer one day, and if I'm just be completely honest with you, I was murmuring and complaining to the Lord about where this nation is heading, the direction, and how much further and further it's heading from a biblical worldview. And as I was murmuring and I was seeking the Lord, He actually spoke to me very clearly. And what he said, and I was seeking Him, I was specifically asking Him, Lord, how do we change a nation? What do I do, especially as an individual? How can we change the course and the direction of a nation? And He spoke to me and He said, by educating the next generation. And He spoke that to me very, very clearly. So I say all that because really the heart and why we're here tonight is to have a meaningful discussion from a biblical perspective on some, unfortunately, controversial topics today. And I just for starting out, I just want to acknowledge the young people who are here especially. So if you're 25 years or younger, would you please stand up just for a second? And why don't we give them a big round of applause? Because you guys are the next generation. Thank you very much. You can sit down. You guys are the next generation, really, and really we're putting this on mostly for you, not just for you, but our idea and our heart behind this was that you can learn and grow from the discussions that we are about to have here tonight. Amen? All right, well, I'll just start with a word of prayer, and then I'll hand it over to Dale. Father God, we just thank you so much for this evening. Lord, thank you that you are still on the throne, and you are God above this nation. Lord, we just pray that you will bless our discussion tonight, that you lead our discussion, and then you speak to hearts tonight, and you change hearts tonight as you always do. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, Dale, I'll turn it over.
Thank you, Pastor Peter. Good evening. It's good to see you. It's kind of like we got the congregation out here in the choir back here in the corner. So, yeah, there you go. Okay. So, thank you very much for being here tonight, for taking time out. My name is Dale Witherington. I am the Chief Steward of Restore Minnesota. We've got brochure back on the table if you're interested. Restore Minnesota started as simply, I've been a missionary pastor to our state legislators and other elected officials for about a decade. And out of serving as a pastor to our elected officials, more and more people around the state were asking us, what can we do in our own backyards? What can we do to start bringing biblical values back into our communities? So we created what we call community action teams, and our mission is that we exist to restore righteousness in the state of Minnesota. And we do that by promoting biblical citizenship. And it's biblical citizenship that educates, equips, empowers, and encourages Holy Spirit-led engagement. Now, we specifically say it that way because we are primarily an educational ministry, and we want it to lead to action, but we don't want to be ready, fire, aim. I want you to think about that. Yeah, it's okay to laugh because we are emotional people, and there's stuff going on that gets our emotions going, and if we're not careful and all we do is operate under our emotions, it doesn't work. So we've got to be much more strategic, and what can be more strategic than seeking out the leading of the Holy Spirit so that we can find out what His plans and strategies are, and we go apply that. So we're doing that county by county, community by community, family by family, and one of our community action teams actually functions in this church. They're here on the second and fourth Monday nights of a month at 6:30. This coming Monday, they're going to talk about the upcoming elections in 2024 and how to be engaged in elections and what that might look like. If it's anywhere from just voting, which is a biblical responsibility. Just going to toss that one out there. But other opportunities that you can play as biblical citizens in this area. And when I say this area, I'm talking about the state of Minnesota. The objective of all that is for spiritual and civic transformation. Because if the gospel is not transformative, what use is the gospel? Okay? We say that the gospel transforms individuals, and transformed lives will transform lives. And then transformed lives transform communities. So we want to have that biblical representation throughout the culture. We understand we're not a theocracy. We will be working with all kinds of folks, Christian and non-Christian, but Christians need to have a voice in the culture. There is a role for the church and the role for Christians in the culture. So it's all got to be based, all this transformation has got to be based on the gospel of Jesus Christ. So out of that, Pastor Peter and Adam, who's not here tonight, but Avery's back at the table for TPUSA and TPUSA Faith. Some of you are familiar with Charlie Kirk's organization, TPUSA, and Restore Minnesota. We all got together because the lady at the back door, kind of in the corner holding the door, Sue Bulkey, she runs our community action team here at this church. And one thing that our community action team does, and how many community action team members do we have here tonight? I know we have a few, but if you're part of this community action team, stand up, would you please? I know there's a handful, because most of you are here to serve. Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, there's a group, Sue, normally about 15, 20 people. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but these are people that, among their many concerns, they have a tremendous heart for you, the youth. Now look, I know that when you look at guys like me, you'll do just like my 8-year-old granddaughter did when she looked at me a couple weeks ago and said, "Pops, you're old." Well, to an 8-year-old, I'm ancient. I get it. But I want you to know I haven't forgotten my youth. I came to Christ as a sophomore in high school, and I know how important it is for my generation to be working with your generation because you're taking over the leadership of this nation. Did you notice when Pastor Peter asked for people 25 years old and younger to stand up, that 2 of the key leaders for here tonight stood up? I think Elliot is the youngest representative in our legislature. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. And he even graduated from Hamlin, of all places. Yeah. So, yeah. I graduated from Bethel. But, I went to Bethel when it was still a Christian school, so okay. No, I'm not supposed to say that anymore. Sorry. I just want you to know how this came together. We have a great desire to collaborate with the youth of America because we understand that our role is to help pass a baton. But just because we're passing a baton doesn't mean we're giving up the race. It means that we want to work together. And what we're going to talk about tonight, these 3 folks have got personal stories. They're going to resonate with you. And they're going to resonate with you on different levels. I don't know how. I'm not going to presume to know how it's going to resonate with the person sitting in your seat, but they're going to resonate. I will tell you that for some of you, you're going to be very uncomfortable. You're not going to like some of the things you hear. It's still their story. Some of you are going to think that we're trying to shame you. Not at all. There is no condemnation in Christ. And there's a big difference between shame and conviction. And if you get convicted of something, thank God for that, and then let's deal with it. You can deal with it. With your folks, with the pastor, with somebody, an adult that you trust. The idea here is to free you up so you can be better used by the Lord in your own backyard. Some of you are here just because this is a good mental exercise and you want to get educated on some things. Take notes. But the last thing that this is meant to be controversial, even though some are going to think it is, because biblical truth is controversial to a culture that doesn't want to hear biblical truth. And that's what you're going to hear tonight. So each of them are going to take a few minutes, and they're going to share their story, about 15, 20 minutes each. And then we're going to do a Q&A time. Some of you are going to be very comfortable to ask questions and so forth, and we'll just kind of work ourselves around the room. And if you're the type of person who came with about 12 different questions, you get to ask one. Okay? So pick out your best one, because everybody who has a question gets to ask one before you get to ask number two. All right? Some of you don't feel comfortable, or the questions might be such a personal nature, you don't want to ask the question. So we're going to have cards, and you can write it on the cards. They'll be anonymous, and we'll have somebody collect the cards. They'll go through them, and they'll be passed up to me, and we'll handle those cards. And it's meant to help us deal with issues, not to call anybody out. We want this to be a gospel time of setting people free. Okay, fair enough? So we have here Miss Clara Munger, originally from Austin, Minnesota. So if you like Hormel chili, but Clara's from Austin. We have Jessica Bartholomew with Act United, and Jessica has got a law enforcement background, and you're going to learn some things about Act United and what's being done in schools and other places around the state to help prevent human trafficking. And then we have Elliot Ingen, who is a state representative from District 36A, which is kind of Lino Lakes and that area up there, right? And you have to deal with Steve LaLiberty as your BPOU. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. He's on my staff, so we'll talk about that. Steve's a great guy. All of them have an intensely personal story. Clara, we'd like to start with you. Okay? So tell us who you are, tell us your story, and fire away. Yeah.
Thank you. Like I said, I'm Clara Munger from Austin, Minnesota. It's kind of strange being in this situation because it's not ever something I find myself in. It's not something I would have ever chosen for myself, public speaking. It's the most terrifying thing I have to do. But I do it because I know it's something that the Lord has placed on my heart, and it's a story that needs to be heard because it's something that is very relevant in our world today. When I was 21, I had an abortion. And as a Christian, that was something I never thought would happen to me. I think we all have been in that place where we're like, it won't happen to me. That happens to other people, but that doesn't happen to me. And I found myself in that situation, pregnant outside of marriage, and was scared, as many women, men and women who find themselves in a situation are often very scared, and they don't know what to do. I currently actually work in a pregnancy center, and I get to experience that every single day, and in many ways relate to those people that come through that door because I've been there. And the best thing I can do is pray for them that they reach out to somebody and talk to somebody. I didn't do that, and that led me down a really dark and painful road that I'm still continuing to work my way through. It's been a little over 2 years, and it's just amazed me what the Lord has done with my life. After I sought healing from my abortion, it's like 7 months of kind of praying and just waiting of, Lord, what is going to happen? I have this calling to share, to talk about it, but I don't know how to do that. I don't have the connections. I don't know people. I'm just me, a 22-year-old with a hope. And it's amazing what the Lord can do with that. It's blown my mind every time I sit back and think of how far I've come from 2 years ago, the healing and the opportunity that he's brought me, and the opportunities that are coming up that hope you guys hear about in the news. It's not something I can share about yet, but it's something going to be big. And when you hear it, you're going to know it. And so I'm to encourage, but I think also to challenge the church and parents and individuals to not be afraid to talk about abortion, because it's so relevant today. I think you might be surprised at how many people that you might know that has had an abortion, that's been in a sticky situation, maybe pregnant outside of marriage. You might be surprised. A lot of people, they don't want to open up about these kind of situations because the church isn't a safe place to talk about it anymore. And that's really sad. The church is probably one of the hardest places to get into, even talk about or to share my story. I've had the wonderful opportunity to have connections to people that have really good connections within a church or a Christian school that's been able to give me a foot in the door to share. And I'm so thankful for that. And yet there needs to be more. Because this isn't something that's just going to go away by staying silent about. It's going to happen through fighting, through talking about it, by being bold. It's going to happen by people stepping up and saying, this has been my experience. As scary as that might be, some of the best ways to connect to people is through our personal stories. And the best way to move people can be through that too. And so, I'm here to represent those men and women who have been in difficult situations and have made the wrong choice, and to show them that that choice doesn't have to be the end of it. You don't have to sit in that guilt and that shame and in that mistake. If you're willing, the Lord can bring you to a place that you never even thought possible, and open doors that just weren't even there to begin with. And then also to challenge you guys to have these conversations, to talk with your kids, to talk with your pastors. And if talking is uncomfortable, to just kind of think about it for yourself of, what would I do if I found myself in a situation? What would I do if I came face to face with somebody who has been in a situation like this? How would I respond? As Christians, we often respond with, oh, well, that's wrong. You shouldn't have done that. And you're right. And when someone comes to you with something really heavy, something that might have been really painful for them, our first response should always be that compassion and grace. There is always a time and place for truth. That will come, I promise. But to be able to open our doors to people who are hurting, we have to come with them with that compassion and that grace. Because if tables were turned around, if you did something and you came to somebody and say, hey, I've done this, and their first response was judgment, do you think you're going to tell somebody else? Probably not. And that's really hard. It's really hard as Christians to take ourselves out of that place of judging someone and just say, okay, thank you for sharing. How can I help you? I just here to kind of share, and just want to thank you guys for listening. And I'm just excited to see what the Lord has to do, because I know he's not finished with me yet. And I know there's probably a lot of great things you guys are going to say as well. So thank you guys. And feel free to ask me any sort of questions. I'm not going to be hurt or offended. I know abortion can be a tough topic to talk about with people. So I just want you guys to know, don't be afraid to ask me any sort of questions. I want those tough questions because they need to be answered as best possible. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Clara. Representative Ingen.
Thanks, Dale. So my name is Elliot Engen. I represent District 36A in the Minnesota House, and if you would have told me that 5 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you. I thought you had to have gray hair and individual wealth to run for office, but I'll kind of start with how I got into this crazy world of politics. I attended Hamline University, thought I was going to get a degree in D3 baseball. Turns out it doesn't pay well and it doesn't exist. But I played 1 year with the St. Paul Saints and got to live out that dream. But while I was at Hamline, I started to see on campus there was really a perpetuation of left-wing ideology. And it was pervasive. It was mandated. It was not only socially unacceptable to be a conservative, saying so would get you in trouble not only with your professors, other faculty. Turns out starting a Turning Point chapter was going to circulate some emails to have you expelled from campus. But that's what I did. I started a Turning Point chapter at Hamline, and on an 8,000 kid campus, 2,000 students showed up. I thought I was the only conservative on that campus. I honestly did. And when I saw that happen, I said, okay, there's a whole generation of conservatives here that feel as if they're being stifled. They're being pushed down. And it's because of our culture. Speaking truth and speaking it boldly and unashamedly, that's very scary nowadays. People are gonna want to put a target on your back. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. After I started that Turning Point chapter, I got invited down to West Palm Beach for a student action summit with Turning Point. Met some really cool people, saw the president. It was a great experience. My wife went with me. She started a Turning Point chapter at Bethel, so it was kind of just something that, hey, let's go to Florida for a weekend in December. I was in a hot tub, of all places, and talking policy like a nerd at the age of 22 with other young men, and they go, are you running for office, or how do you know about policy like this? And I said, no, I'm not running for office, no way. And they said, well, you should think about it. I said, are you crazy? And they said, well, we're both state legislators in Iowa. What that conversation started was the inception of Run Gen Z, which to date has elected over 175 conservative Gen Z people throughout the nation. It came out of nowhere. I had no idea that that's what I was walking into, but I think God opens doors, and it's just up to us to walk through them. But after getting elected, which was it was a hard fight. 22,000 doors knocked, tons of things learned along the way, having to prove to people that you're up to the task, even though you're young. After that, day one of session, House File 1, the Democrats bring up, is an abortion bill. And it's not only an abortion bill, it is an abortion bill that would put us alongside North Korea and China as the only states in the world that allow for 9-month abortion at any point for any reason, no protections, guardrails, no mandated reporting of potential sex trafficking that's brought a minor child in for an abortion, no parental consent notification mandates. It really was out of this world, how crazy it was. God put a really hard fought fight first, and I didn't know why. But 3 hours and 1 minute into this debate on House File 1, in my first week of session, I'm still trying to figure out where in the heck the bathrooms are, I summoned up the courage to stand up and tell the story about how my mom was born. My grandma was in an abusive relationship. She was abused at the age of 15 and got pregnant, went into an abortion facility after being told that she had to, otherwise she wasn't going to get a ride home from the man who is my mom's father. While my grandma was sitting in the lobby of the abortion clinic, an elderly woman walked up to her and said, "Sweetheart, you're fidgeting a lot. You look somewhat nervous. Do you not want to do this? If you don't, I'll help you out. I'll raise the baby with you, and we can walk out of here out the back door." And my grandma said yes. I am only here because of extension of that elderly woman, who I believe to this day is it's a guardian angel. Seriously. I told that story on the House floor, and even the left had to kind of stop what they're doing. And most of the time they're kind of, either texting or looking on their computers, walking around. They stopped and they listened, because it was a real story. And with the Dobbs decision, which is awesome, we're faced with new challenges in the states when it comes to abortion policy. We've seen radical bills just like what Minnesota adopted that are enshrining abortion as something that should be not only celebrated but taxpayer funded in all cases. And I think that our response to that shouldn't just be starting out with blanket bans. We should show that we actually own the compassion on this issue, that we are the compassionate people, that the pro-life generation, the next generation, is going to uplift moms, uplift families, and uplift babies, not just through word, but by action. It takes us not only to hold a sign, but to go and donate or volunteer at a women's life care center. It takes us reaching out and talking to somebody who's brave enough to share their story about an abortion and saying, how could we have prevented that? What were your thoughts? What were the barriers? And trying to fill those roles. We are going to win this argument. We are. We already have. Life is worth fighting for in all cases. But it starts with action. It must start with action. That's all I have for you. I'm excited for Q&A. I'm excited to be here. I want to thank everybody who put this together, because these are the conversations that churches are shying away from, and this one embraced it. I want to give them a round of applause for doing that, because that takes courage. So I'll pass it off, but thank you and look forward to questions.
So, testing 1, 2. Am I on? I'm going to go a little different direction, which is the story of my life. So, I gave up embarrassment a long time ago. But I'm going to share my story and what brought me into anti-trafficking work, but I'm also going to share some information and some facts with you, because I got a text message asking if I would share information about what is the state of human trafficking in Minnesota? What does it look like? How's it happening? How can we notice it? What can we do about it? And I thought that that is a very important thing, so that we understand what we're facing in Minnesota when it comes to human trafficking. Why is this even a topic or a conversation that we're having at Lake Elmo at a church in Minnesota, right? So, because we have an issue. So I think, yeah, okay, so, and I might keep turning around, so I apologize for that, but it's exciting, and I really appreciate being invited to a panel like this that has the theme of Celebrate Life, because how does human trafficking and how do I fit in, other than being, because I am senior and other things, but how does this topic fit into the celebration of life? Because at the bottom and at the root and at the darkness of human trafficking is the devaluing of human life. It is losing sight of the value of a human being and every person that is created with value that they didn't earn, and therefore they can't lose because they were created with that value. So my story is, at 16 years old, I was hanging out with a friend in prestigious West Bloomington, Minnesota, and we were going to Thomas Jefferson High School, and our hockey team was all-state every year for like 9,000 Roman years in a row, and I had 2 parents and an amazing home and parents and family life, and so did my friend. And at 16 years old, we're able to drive, so we go to hang out. We hang out where other teenagers hang out, just like everybody else. We met a couple of guys, just like almost everybody else, and they were slightly older, not by much. And we ended up separated that night, and I returned home, and she did not. And I wouldn't find out for 3 months that from prestigious, awesome neighborhood, wealthy West Bloomington, we weren't wealthy, we were middle class, but wealthy West Bloomington, what it's known for, a teenager was now taken into sex trafficking. And she would be brought to New York and across several states. And I wouldn't find out until 3 months later when she showed up at my house with that same guy I remembered from that night. And I don't know why he allowed her to come back and chat with me for 10 minutes, but it was extremely controlled. It was extremely heavy, the feeling that was in the room, and she was explaining to me what had happened, and all I could remember thinking in my 16-year-old brain was, I had no idea my friend would want to be involved in prostitution. Like, that's so not like her. I didn't understand human trafficking. I didn't even know that word. I don't even think that word was out there. And that was my introduction to the fact that children and teenagers and our college students are being trafficked in our state and out of our state and into our state. I would later go into youth ministry and overseas missions and become a police officer. I would work half of my career undercover in Minnesota juvenile sex trafficking investigations. And I took an early retirement in 2014. And in 2015, God interrupted my life, which brings me to trying to click to the next slide. I don't know if it's me or I guess they said sometimes it won't flip, so if you flip it. But so here I am, a retired police officer, because it'll have some facts on there for you that I want you to take away tonight. So here I am, a retired police officer, a mom of 3, and I'm in a prayer meeting and praying, and God interrupted my life in the same way that he interrupted Moses minding his own business, out in the fields, being a shepherd, married, hanging out, doing what he does on a daily basis. And God interrupted me with that same scripture that he gave Moses and said that I've seen the oppression of my people. I see what is happening to people that are created in my image, in their enslavement. And I've heard their cry, I've heard their prayers, and I am coming to deliver them. And now this isn't, Bible days. This is 2015 in Minnesota, and God said, I'm coming to deliver them, and now come, I send you. And he might be calling some of us and some of our young people, I hope tonight, into that same thing. Come, Moses, I send you. Come, Jessica, come, youth group. I send you into your community, your school, your church, into your state and your world to help end human trafficking. It is the fastest growing crime in the world. It targets young people, college age and younger. And in my mind, in the way I think, that doesn't make you the targeted generation. That makes you the front line of putting the biggest dent in human trafficking that we have ever seen in history. I believe 1,000% that human trafficking is huge in this generation. And I believe 100% that it is targeting. We see this generation. And I also see that this is the first generation in a couple of generations that is actually looking for something to be on mission for. Something to light your heart on fire and say, I'm drawing the line in the sand. I'm not okay with this. I have information, I have education, I'm aware of what is happening, how it happens, and I am equipped to tackle this. Why? Because I am born, because I'm here, because this is my generation. So I don't believe you're just the targeted generation. You're the generation of leadership and the voice that is going to help end this. And that was the mission that God put me on. As a cop, you respond after things happen. People call 911 when things very bad have happened. And you're there to help with, the victim services and the justice. But God was calling me to take everything I knew from being 16 years old in Minnesota and losing my friend and being an undercover officer in human trafficking investigations, take everything I know and go upstream in prevention. Start talking to the youth, talking to kids, talking to young people, talking to communities and families and community leaders so that we can get ahead of it, because you don't end anything by responding to it. You end it when it doesn't happen in the first place. So when God called me, I said, this is what Jessica does. I'm a person of purpose, and don't like making things up. So I said, Lord, what do you want me to do? And he said, I want you to help my people become aware, equipped, and deployed into the front lines of the movement to end human trafficking. And so I started writing that down, aware, equipped, and deployed into the movement to end human trafficking. And as I wrote that down, the acronym stood out to me, AED, and I'm like, wow, that sounds good. Wait a minute, it's familiar. Like, what the heck is an AED? Who knows what an AED is? Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's the artificial external defibrillator. It's the thing that when our heart is starting to fail, when our heart is out of rhythm, it's the machine that we get and that we put the pads on our heart, and it shocks our heart back into rhythm, back into a life-saving, life-giving rhythm. And I knew God was saying, by spreading awareness and helping equip and helping deploy people into the movement, you are helping aligning a generation with my heart, which is to restore human value, created in my image. And I am not okay with exploitation. I'm not okay with human trafficking and control. And so I placed myself on mission, and so that's what I'm going to do tonight is, in my next, I promise 5 or 6 minutes. I promise.
You got plenty of
Problem
time.
child.
Take what you need.
Okay, so awareness. Okay, so we know it's a global issue, but it's also a local issue. And we have over 300,000 youth that are trafficked within our borders, American children trafficked within our nation on any given day. 17 to 20,000 people are brought in from other countries for the specific purpose of being trafficked within our borders. We know now that there is 8,000 to 86,000 children that are missing from the border crisis, with the number one suspicion of what has happened being human trafficking. And sex trafficking is the fastest growing crime in our nation, targeting people college age and younger. We also know that 1/3 of trafficked minors in the United States are trafficked by their own families, and that 36 to 50% of trafficked minors are boys, biological male boys. So this isn't just a crime that is impacting women and girls. So that helps, train our minds around prevention and awareness, right? Everything we want to talk to our girls about, we want to be talking to our guys about. We need our brothers looking out for sisters, sisters looking out for brothers, because this is impacting people of all genders, ethnicities, and across all our communities. I'm just trusting it, Clay. Bringing it home to Minnesota. In Minnesota, on any given day, 12,000 people are trafficked. This is an actual map from the Minnesota Department of Health. They do a student survey in our high schools every 3 years. They added for the first time in 2019 a question that allowed kids to answer, students in high school to answer whether or not they had experienced this type of situation before. Well, the experience that was listed met the federal and state criminal definition of juvenile sex trafficking. And what they found is over 5,000 students are sitting in our Minnesota high schools that have been a victim of sex trafficking. They also found that these kids were from every region of Minnesota. This is the actual finding. So 1.5% of high school students, 2% of high school students, 1.3% in all these regions of Minnesota. And they also found, of the kids that reported, that there was no difference in the rates between the boys and girls that reported being a victim of sex trafficking. So that puts us on the front lines, right? So the movies say taken and gone and somewhere else, but they're still in our high schools, in our middle schools. That makes us the front line. Students can be the front line. And with information and resources, we have a lot of youth resources. Everything we do is led 50% by youth. And so it's youth-designed resources for youth at our table that you can pick up and have in your back pocket, because you are now the eyes and the ears that might be able to see something, say something, support, and report. So the common vulnerabilities that we see of survivor youth. What are some of those vulnerabilities? Although this can impact anybody, we do see some common vulnerabilities. Why is it important to know the common vulnerabilities and some of the risk factors? Because if we know what predators are going to target, guess what we get to do? We get to fill the gaps. We get to step in. Youth homelessness, right? Poverty, emotional poverty, loneliness, marginalization, depression, those kids that eat alone at school and don't have friends, that are not invited into the group. Any marginalized community, our undocumented community, right? So we think we're being helpful, and by we, I don't mean me, by bringing people in illegally. What happens then? Well, now they're afraid to call the police because they're here illegally. So now what we see is we see them being trafficked even within their own cultures and their own families, with the knowledge that they're too afraid to report and call the police. So we can step into those gaps in prevention and help end human trafficking by stepping into that space first. Youth survivors say, when we ask, and there's research and surveys and all kinds of stuff, but we work with survivors too. What can we do? What's the number one thing, if you had to pick one thing we could do to help end juvenile trafficking in Minnesota? And hands down, prevention education. We have to open up the conversation. We have to talk about this. I thought I was going to get kidnapped, so I was safe at night. I was safe on campus. I was safe when I was walking to my car. I had no idea my trafficker would be somebody that I knew, that groomed me into a relationship, that I thought I could trust, and then would flip the script in the drop of a dime, and I would find myself in exploitation and trafficking. So 90% of juvenile trafficking starts in the context of this fake, manipulative, tricky, lying relationship. So what are the signs that youth can look for, or even family members can look for? That new controlling friend, boyfriend, girlfriend. That new controlling person that maybe they got to ask permission from before they can hang out after school or go to the mall, or they have to answer their phone within 2 rings, or they're paranoid about their phone because there's rules and conditions from this person on them. Unexplained absences and being tardy in class. The biggest thing is a sudden change in behavior or in their appearance. There's like this sudden dramatic change. I used to hang out, now I'm isolating a lot. I used to always pick up the phone for you, now I hardly ever hang out or talk. I'm starting to dress differently. Maybe I'm starting to use alcohol or drugs, or increasing that use. So these sudden changes. And the other thing youth survivors say is, I wish somebody would have said, "Are you okay?" And they'll be honest and say, I may not have told you. I might have been like, "I'm good, I'm all good," because I was too afraid to tell at that time. But it let me know I'm seen, I'm still here. I still have value, and it planted a seed of confidence for the next person that said it, and then the next person that said it. And by the 4th person that asked me how I'm doing, I came forward and I finally told somebody. So how are youth leading the movement to end it? How are you guys making a dent, the biggest dent in history? The first thing I want you to know is that you are equipped. The young people in this room, everybody, but the young people in this room, you are equipped to influence yourself, to help restore value to others. The 2 biggest things that are fueling this dark industry of sex trafficking that we are battling in our culture today, one is the love of money, profit over people. I would rather make money than protect my privacy or my body. I'd rather make money off of somebody else. Profit over people and porn culture. Those are the 2 biggest giants and mountains in the way and growing and allowing sex trafficking to grow. Your influence and your decisions, I always say new information leads to new decision. Learn something new today and I make a different decision, in 5 minutes. You can always change whatever decisions you're making based on new information. And by rejecting porn culture, rejecting profits over people, You help influence others around you. And all it takes is one person to influence those around you. That influences the group. The group influences the whole school influences the community. Next thing you know, the community is influencing a whole culture and flipping the script on this value of money and porn culture over people, over the value of human life and of a person. That's how we got here, was individual influence, and that's how we're going to reverse it and flip the script and get out of the mess that we're now in. I like to bring up Moses in that whole calling in my story because Moses is minding his own business. He called Moses, he called me, he might call you. And I love how regular guy Moses is. He was like, God is calling me to the front lines of going on mission against something like human trafficking or the enslavement of a whole nation by another nation. And he struggled and wrestled with God. He's like, who am I, he said, to even go do that? He said, I'm not even a good speaker, and you're asking me to go say something? I'm slow of speech. People barely are patient with me to listen. And then he had so many wrestlings with God. And here's something that I hear in Moses as I'm reading through all his reasons, is he's like, you want me to go back to the same culture where I was once one of them, where I was once making those same decisions, and you think they're going to trust me and listen to me and think God sent me, the same guy who was once there making those decisions and doing those things against them? And the answer is yeah. Our God is the God of the turnaround. He works out all things together for our good. He takes our story and he takes the mess and he flips it and he turns it into you being the very messenger that goes back to that same culture that you were once a part of, making those decisions. And as a matter of fact, that'll be the power of your story. So yes, he will send you back. So if you feel that call, if you are in college or younger and you're feeling that burden on your heart tonight, that you think you want to respond and learn more and respond to that call and that mission of being on the front lines or the movement of ending human trafficking in your generation, in your community, in your state, in your world, please meet us at the table. We have a QR code, or you can text right now or email, and you can be a part of the movement. We have set up cells of youth all over the place, and so this is a new launch in 2024 because everybody's like, what are they doing in Burnsville? Well, what did they do in Mille Lacs? What did they do here? And finally, it takes me a lot, to wake up and go, why aren't we all doing this together? So Act United is launching all our global teams together this year. So you can be a part of even putting together what that looks like for your generation on how we all can be together in this fight. Learn from each other, hear from each other, hear each other's testimonies and influence in the different communities throughout our state. So I thank you so much for letting me run out of spit with you. And thank you. And taking longer than amazing people, but so, thank you. Okay.
Anybody else stirred just a little bit? This is the second time I've heard you make presentation. I heard you when you, with Representative Mac Rossell, to talk about the bill that we could never get a hearing on, just to try to increase, because I think we're the third worst state in the nation when it comes to any kind of punishment to perpetrators. Third most in numbers, and I know the Las Vegas Police Department refers to Minnesota as the factory when it comes to trafficking. It's that, and I don't know about you, what that does in terms of stirring your blood at all. Like you, I played baseball when I was in college, but I also played football and I played defense, and this stuff makes me want to go hit somebody. In Jesus' name, I'm pound the snot out of. Okay, I know this is being live streamed, and that probably doesn't go real well with some of you, but that's too bad. Because we are fighting for our kids. God help us, based on your story. You might be fighting for the friend that you're going to go to school with tomorrow. And you don't even know it. And it's not your fault. It's just, we just don't know what we don't know. My wife and I have got 7 grandchildren. What does your family look like? See, when Sound of Freedom came out last year, one of the first things that a few of us did is we got together and we've got a venue lined up. Wouldn't it be kind of amazing if we could get Jim Caviezel here? And it's only going to cost us about $300,000. His fee went up from $70 to $300 because of that movie. But what do we have right here? Right in our own backyard. Now, we might or might not get Jim Caviezel here, but what if we got these 3 people throughout the state with this message? What if we helped Act United get the teams that's necessary through the state? What if we actually got people in the state of Minnesota engaged enough in community action teams with groups like Restore Minnesota, TPUSA Faith, and other parts of TPUSA, so that we could get enough citizen involvement to back up our state legislature and turn things around legally? Because right now, we're fighting a culture of death, people. And thank you for sharing your journey. So here's what we're going to do. We've got just over half an hour. And we're going to take questions. So I was filibustering a little bit because I want you to be stewing on, because I told you earlier, you're going to get to ask one question before and everybody gets to get the first one before you get your second one. And I know that we've got guys with it looks like offering buckets, but what they really are is they're going to collect your cards if you want to write down any questions. So does anybody need a card to write down a question? I guess first of all, if you do, the guys will get them to you. And while they're doing that, Elliot, go ahead, jump in.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Not at all.
I do believe in God moments, and listening to your story, that was a God moment. I've now authored 3 human trafficking bills, increased sentences. Democrats won't hear it, but prevention. Let's look at some grant money. So it's that sort of stuff that I just had to tell somebody. It was eating me up inside.
See, and unfortunately, it wasn't just the Democrats that wouldn't hear it. We couldn't even get a certain committee in the Senate.
Really?
When the Republicans were majority. But you can talk to Representative Grossel, and you can talk more with Jessica about that. That could probably help you in your bill writing. Okay? So let's do this. We're going to just work our way over here and work our way around and back. So if anybody in this section right here have a question that you would like to ask any of the 3? Not yet. Okay. Yes, sir. And we're going to give you a microphone so you can speak so everybody can hear the question.
What was your name again?
Which one?
The one right down on the right.
The far end, Representative Engen. Elliot. Okay. Elliot.
What kind of led you so much to thrive towards politics a little more?
You know, I'm sure just like you're probably seeing the world around you and it's crazy and there seems to be no sanity left. And you're sitting there thinking to yourself at the end of a long day, my gosh, when is this going to get better? Something needs to change. I think I got sick and tired of saying that in my own head. And I said, well, you know what? If the system's broken, we have to get good people in there to fix a broken system. And it was a moment of sheer insanity when I told my now wife, who we're expecting a baby boy in June, but my then fiance and girlfriend, I think fiance at the time, I said, I think I want to run for office. And she said, you're serious? I was still in college. And I quit baseball a week after that, and here I am. So I think I just got sick and tired of sitting on the sidelines. And it's good people like yourself who ask that question, who eventually are going to inherit the office too and start to fix things, turn it around. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. Okay, in this section here, question. Yes, sir, back in the red hat. And we'll get the microphone to you. We're going to put Pastor Peter on an exercise program here. Okay.
Given the context of the state of Minnesota, we have a blue executive, judicial, and legislative branch. All of them are fully blue in the majority. And so obviously it's pretty difficult to get political legislation across for the pro-life movement. So beyond activism, I'm wondering what you guys have achieved politically in terms of policy.
Okay, first question is, how old are you, sir? 15.
15.
15. He asked, that's one of the most intelligent questions. Just the fact that you knew that there were, okay.
That was better than Minnesota media, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
To your question, last session I actually introduced a bill that would make it easier to afford having a kid. It would eliminate the state sales taxes on infant care items, cribs, strollers, blankets, diapers, wipes, yada, 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 go on the line. It passed unanimously out of both the House and Senate. Even Democrats said, yeah, this is good policy. On Mother's Day at 2 o'clock in the morning, the tax conference committee, which is all Democrats, went behind closed doors and line item vetoed just that bill, proving that they don't own compassion on this issue. They don't want to make it easier to have a family. They don't want to make it easier for those expecting moms who are on a single paycheck, barely able to pay the utilities to have a kid, because they only want one choice, and it's for them to go to Planned Parenthood, who then funds their campaigns. This is a money racketeering ring. This is a pyramid scheme, and it was very, very evident when they slashed that bill. A lot of what we do in the minority is look for ways to expose the other side. And, you know, I actually believed for a couple minutes there that in good faith they were going to pass that bill. Then they didn't. All bets are off. I know where they stand on this.
Great question. This section here. Anybody have a question in this section? You chew on it? All right, let's move over here. Yes, sir.
Hi, so I guess question I have, and any of you three can chime in on it, is when it comes to the issue of sex trafficking, it's truly mind-blowing. Everybody sees how broken just the whole border system is in our country. We see every day, I think it's estimated that, I don't even know what's even true anymore. So supposedly they say at least 7 million illegals have crossed since January of 2021. I've heard some reports that there could be as many as 16 million, and then who knows where they're even going from there. That's an area where you can see lots of potential sex trafficking happen because the border is just not secure. And I guess the question that I have is, I guess this is more of a question for the representative. What is, as far as legislation goes, as far as anti-sex trafficking, do politicians just not care? It seems like at the federal and state levels, we see, and I'm just gonna say this, our president and vice president have failed us on this issue.
100%.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been an absolute train wreck on this issue. And the point is, and then you see Republicans in DC reject the issue. They don't stand up and fight. It's like, who's really the good guy here? It seems like neither side is doing anything.
Don't
to stop
trust
it.
politicians across the board. You should just
You
start
are-
there.
you are
Worship
correct.
God, don't worship God.
You are correct. Yeah, you are correct. But it seems like I see both sides when it comes to bills, and it seems like neither side gives two flips about
That's a great
about
question.
it.
We're going to let all three of them answer from different perspectives, because we're going to have a legislative response to that. We're going to have somebody who's working in trafficking respond to that, and somebody who's working in counseling those who may or may not get abortions, and some of the experiences you may be having with some of the people coming in. So let's just work our way across, and please respond to that question from the perspective that you're dealing with. So go ahead.
So she's the expert on this. She's dealt with it. When people like myself, when politicians fail to act, it's you guys who are going to make the difference. This is a culture issue. Our culture is broken fundamentally. The fact that we've allowed this to happen for so long under our noses and we are doing nothing about it is a failure of the highest regard. So far, I've authored 3 bills on the issue. Grooming is happening everywhere. It's seeping into culture to the point where people don't even see it as grooming or as predatory behavior anymore. It's just socially acceptable for somebody to talk to a minor about changing their sex or about engaging in sex when they can't even consent to sex. That's happening everywhere. And if we don't shut that down real quick, it's going to grow. When 43% of young women who are crossing the border illegally are sex trafficked, and we're not doing anything about the border, it's because there are political ramifications that people are more concerned about than they are about fixing an issue. To your overall question, you want to see change on this. Don't expect politicians to ever come to your side and save you. They're not. We're going to fight for you. There's some out there that really are fighting on this issue, and several of my friends are in the House. But what can you do yourself? That needs to be the question that we start with. What can you do today to do what politicians are failing to do? So I'll pass it on to the expert.
So let's go to Jessica with that. Yeah, please.
So I've been a cop and been in government, and now I'm the executive director of a nonprofit, and just a human and a woman and a Christian and a believer, and I get more done in a day than I did in a year as a cop, because the system turns like a huge ship, but on the ground you let me loose and things are going to happen, and they're going to happen fast. And so everything good, everything righteous, everything powerful, and everything fast happens at the bottom. You'll find me in the mud. So it's the people that are going to move the needle. When we start drawing the line, when we start rejecting the things that are fueling human trafficking, when we start getting rid of I can't find the word right now, but like being open and honest and able to talk about things like pornography and the things that are destroying our men and our women and our families and our humans. Like, stop the shame. I'm on an anti-shame campaign because we need people free to help free people. Like, it's got to be okay to talk about. I mean, we just got to start hitting this stuff at the roots, at every single root, and take an axe to all of them until that big thing falls to the ground. Now, I've had this group wonder why I'm with this group Tuesday, and this group wonder why I'm with this group on Thursday, and I'll tell you what, because I find allies everywhere. And there's allies in the House and the Senate, and there's allies on the police department, there's allies in our schools. As an overall thing, that's a different story, but I look for my allies. And I am, proud and happy to say that in 2018, I was asked to testify before the House to pass a bill in Minnesota by a Representative Whalen, who wrote a bill that said everybody in the hospitality industry, our hotels, our motels, our bed and breakfast, need to have training on what human trafficking looks like, because hotels are one of the top venues where this is happening. And my only question was, will training be for free? Because mom and pop bed and breakfast don't have the budget the Marriott has. And money was released to produce free online training. And so I testified for that bill, and we got it passed. And now you have 90 days to train all your hotel, motel, bed and breakfast employees, any hospitality, on the signs of human trafficking and what to do. Now, as far as the border and the people, that's where we start talking. That's my conversation. Like, people, humans, human beings, and children. If we don't agree on protecting kids, I got nothing left to talk about, not even past the salt. I mean, there is nothing left to say if we don't agree on protecting our kids. That can't be controversial. If it's controversial, there's a deeper conversation somebody needs to have with you. If you can't agree to that. The saddest thing that I have ever had to hear, I work in the schools. Act United has trafficking prevention programs and online safety. We're in public schools, private schools, homeschool co-ops, and working with these kids. And the saddest thing I heard is sitting in a high school, giving presentation afterward. I had a little small group of 7 students that were with me for a few weeks just to do little breakout groups and talk and go deeper on the issues. All 7 kids in my group had been a victim of a sexual assault. One kid was a victim of child sexual abuse material, pornography, at the age of 12. Another kid told me that she's part of an undocumented family and her 10-year-old cousin is being sex trafficked, a boy, and the family won't report because they don't want to get deported. We are creating vulnerability through illegal entry. I don't have all the answers. God has all the answers. I don't have all the answers, but in my line of work in the mud, we create vulnerability. A whole group and community and families and children too afraid to call the police and get help, that are being preyed upon by traffickers even within their own community. So that is why I am all for legal entry, because I want you confident that you can call the police without having to worry about 9 other things if something bad is happening in your family. So we have to do a lot of work in that community to build trust, kind of out of the police realm.
Claire, you've got a little bit different perspective now, working with those who have been impregnated. Okay, talk to us about that, please.
I wanted to piggyback off of Elliot's question of what can we do. If our government isn't working for us, we still have power to do things. We're not blinded or subjected to our government. They do a lot of things, but we also are much bigger than our government. And so I would implore you to think, what can I do? Backing behind organizations as pregnancy centers, your nonprofit, backing behind organizations that stand for what you are looking for, I think can be really helpful. And getting educated on what do these organizations do. Specifically for pregnancy centers, I know we're attacked because people, the media is spreading lies about, oh, well, we're just doing one thing, we're trying to prevent this, we have an agenda. Well, Planned Parenthood has an agenda. Everybody has an agenda. It just depends on what kind of agenda you're looking for. But getting educated and understanding that what pregnancy centers do, we're a safe environment. Obviously, we want you to choose life, and yet at the end of the day, we're just here for you. And so if you do end up having an abortion or going a different route, we want our clients to know that they can come back. And we have had clients come back. They've come in, taken a pregnancy test, talked with our counselors, went a different route. We've heard back from them and said, hey, I need some help. And so I think it's good to stand behind organizations. If our government is doing a good job protecting our people, then we need to stand behind those places that are and help them, because we have power as a people.
Thank you. I've got a question bubbling up in me, but this section is next. No, we already did your section. We'll come back. It's this section's turn. It's this section's turn. You have a question here? Anybody? Okay. So I will get to you. You will be next, because we're working our way back. This section already had their shot. We're moving over and we're coming back. That was a rule. Here's the one that's bubbling up in me as I'm listening to the three of you. Is it just me, or are we missing the connecting of the dots when Minnesota passed same-sex marriage in 2013 and then passed the anti-bullying bill in 2014? That bill, of course, opened the door to biological men having access to women's bathrooms. It opened the door to biological males getting on girls' sports teams and getting in their locker rooms and those sorts of things. That started really the proliferation of the transgender movement. It gave pedophiles, that gave them the platform to go get the same civil rights status as the LGBT community. That bill really did a lot when it cemented to the same sex. And then we've got a lot of people in this room who are involved in task forces trying to work with their school boards, because we know that there are curriculums and there are books and other things that are considered by the FBI to be child pornography in the school systems. And we've seen a proliferation of more teachers, we see it almost every week, more teachers across the country are being arrested for having sex with 14, 15, 16-year-old students. Is anybody else connecting the dots that the proliferation of what's going on in our education system because of what's being allowed in curriculums, like through Education Minnesota, is helping to promote the grooming that opens the door of desensitizing the kids, and then they become more susceptible to being victims? Is anybody else connecting those dots, or am I off the wall?
Everybody worships something. You either worship God or you worship yourself. And when you worship yourself, you're going to fall. You're going to break as an individual. And I think right now that's what our culture's in. We need to fix that first and foremost, because that's what's perpetuating the acts that are leading to human trafficking, which then leads to needing an abortion, which then leads to self-identity crisis and feeling like self-actualization is not a reality for you. This is all a spiritual battle, guys. It really is. It starts with bringing God back into our country, first and foremost. And then second, equipping the next generation to be warriors and not enablers of this same issue. It's happening in our schools right now, as we just heard. I think I talked to you earlier, and you told me about last week there was a teacher that was arrested somewhere for having sex with a minor. Didn't you?
Yeah, it was child pornography.
Yeah, so this is happening right under our nose. We just have to not accept it anymore. Demand that your representatives do something on this. Demand it. And then when you see them next, when they're asking for your vote, because that's the only time you ever see them, ask them what they did. Ask them what the hell they did. That's my piece of advice, but putting our foot down is just the start. We cannot accept this anymore. Demand something.
Ma'am, your turn. What is your question?
Well, first I have a comment to the former policewoman. Thank you for sharing the indicators with this audience as to what may cause you to consider that there is a vulnerable child or a vulnerable young adult, because we are all responsible to take care of our neighbor. God holds us responsible even if we don't think he does. So thank you very much for that, because I see those indicators in people's lives. And I would like to ask, I know you mentioned that the level of trafficking is extremely high in high school and in middle school. Do you have any statistics? I work in both a elementary and a preschool kindergarten environment. Do you have any statistics there?
Statistics and data in this line of work is very difficult. Because I always look at the trusted resources that have been doing this work for a very long time. But this is one of the most underreported crimes in our nation. And also what skews our numbers to be way less than what they actually are is once a case goes through the criminal justice system, it may not be coded in our national database as human trafficking anymore, because through the process it got brought down to maybe a public prostitution or a child abuse or something else. So the numbers that we have even are grossly low from underreporting, and also children. As young as infants are trafficked. Well, of course, they don't report. They're not vocal. They can't advocate for themselves. So our numbers are grossly low. And so the best number that we have to work with right now, at least for the state of Minnesota, is the 5,000 kids in high school. I don't know of an exact number or data for the children. I do know that one of the crimes that we also do work in prevention is the online sexual exploitation, or known as sextortion. And right now, Minnesota and the nation is under an FBI crisis level warning that we are seeing an increased spike in children being solicited for nudes and private images online, and they're targeting boys 12 to 17 years old. We've had 20 confirmed death by suicide of these boys because of being a victim of this crime. And when we look at the data there, we know that 1 in 4 kids between the ages of 9 and 12 will be asked at least once a month for a nude photo while they're gaming. We know that 1 in 7 will send a nude photo of themselves, and 1 in 3 will never tell anybody what happened. The youngest child and family that we've helped to support and advocate for was 2nd grade. here in Minnesota. So we know that it affects all ages, both those crimes. So, but I don't know a specific number for elementary.
Okay. Now we'll move over to this section again. And I do have 4 that got turned in that we'll get to, but this section. Yes, ma'am. Microphone's coming.
I just kind of on that too, like, what about these kids who have been groomed from the beginning that don't know they're being trafficked? Like, I know people who are going through that right now and they don't know that what they're doing is not right. And they don't know that they're being used like that, and you know, like, they just think that's their life and they don't know any better. And so, I don't know, I just wanted to say that because I know people personally like that who I grew up with and were going through that, and we just didn't know, you know, and it was just.
So can you make your question a little clearer on what
I don't
you're
even know what my question was, to tell you the truth.
It kind of sounds like you're asking, how do we, if we're sensing that this kind of grooming is going on, how can we clarify what we can do about it? Who do we go to? That's kind of what I'm hearing you ask. Is that somewhat accurate?
Sure.
Okay, jump in, help out, please.
Good.
I'm actually glad that it's been, you know, brought up. We have a conference every year, and I kept wanting to bring that topic forward at our annual conference, and I really felt impressed by God to not do it yet. And then the year came, and it was the COVID year, and we did a virtual conference that year, and I worked with the Pine County attorney who had actually worked a case of cult grooming, which was cult child sexual abuse in marriage, and it was just a part of life. It was normal. I mean, this is how the kids were raised. They were raised in that environment. Like I said earlier, we know that at least 1/3 of trafficked minors in the United States are trafficked by their own families. And like I also mentioned, you know, we see sex trafficking as young as infancy. I mean, it's really a horror and a horrible situation. And yeah, you don't recognize signs and indicators and symptoms or think anything's wrong if this is your family, this is your household. And for me, one of the biggest things for me is this awareness piece that God's called me to do, and also to be in the schools and talking to kids and in the churches and in the community. Because if we can reach kids, if you hear one person, you know, my grandma or my cousin is telling me that this isn't right, or I have a new friend out in the community and they're telling me that that's not normal, but then they also hear somebody at school that starts talking about trafficking and the effects of trafficking, and that there's help and there's support and there's resources for youth, and gives the criminal definition and says that this state, at least in Minnesota, has released some funding to help with youth survivors. And so you start building that confidence, and the more that they're hearing it at home or church or the community, and then the guest speaker in school, then that's all planting those seeds, and that's all building that confidence. And then, of course, prayer, just the breakthrough of the mind. And God can do and has done and does miraculous things to set people free. So it's the whole community and everybody sharing the awareness. And when you're somebody that is very close to the situation, it is super sad. I mean, it's sad. And the best thing I can say is prayer and support and love and information in pieces that are going to help maintain that relationship with that person. Because when the time is right, you're going to be the trusted person that they're going to come to. And, you know, grab some resources from our table if you don't, you know, have any already or whatever, on where to get some support in Minnesota or wherever they're from. So, and we do support for families and loved ones too at Act United that are in some of those situations. And we've even talked to youth. We've had parents or concerned people call and say, you know, can you talk to my kid about this or about the online stuff? Because they're thinking I'm just, you know, mom with a bunch of rules, and can you let them know kind of what the real deal is? So any way we can help, but that is, yeah, it's a difficult situation, and that's my best hope.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. Question in this section? Uh-oh, saw two hands go. So let's go back there, please. All the way in the back.
So this question is actually for Elliot. Over the last couple years, I've felt really led to be running for Minnesota State Senate at some point. And so I just wanted to ask you what you would recommend to be that first step to get there, because you had mentioned that you knocked on 22,000 doors and that it was a process. Just kind of wanted to understand how you got from point A to B, and maybe I can grab your contact info.
Honestly, it was I couldn't even really tell you. 22,000 doors. That was just in 2022. I think in total I'm closer to 60,000. I burned through 4 pairs of boots. Honestly, naivety is a power in politics, because you just being you and not being tainted by a system that really is gross and is working actively against the best interests of a lot of you, of all of you in this room right now. The fact that we're having this discussion and stuff hasn't been done just goes to show it. Being unashamed to say that at a door to anybody, regardless of red or blue, people are going to notice. In 2020, I lost by 100 votes. That was the first time that I ran. 100 votes. Trump lost that district by nearly 4,000. So we pulled over, I think we pulled over 3,600 Biden voters that election cycle, and it's because they hadn't seen somebody that was outside of the political boxes of red or blue. You need to be yourself. You need to be innovative and think differently than what has been done, because it's not working anyways. So just be yourself, man.
Thank you. Over here? I did. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so we've definitely covered a lot, and I'm so thankful for all 3 of you all. I do have a question regarding the safe haven boxes. I'm not sure if you all are aware of them or know anything about them, but I'm wondering if Minnesota or even Wisconsin, anything in between, has adopted those safe haven boxes, and if they haven't, maybe you all have some information of those that are to come, or maybe something's being pushed in that area. And the reason why it really is dear is because one of the biggest ways, and especially in ministry, you hear a lot about abortion and what are my options. And so when you begin to get specific on those options, one of them is adoption, or that fear of even people knowing or being seen. And I really feel like those safe haven boxes have been effective in the other states that have adopted them, and so maybe you all can shine some light on that.
Actually, I'm glad that you brought that up. I have a bill that's going to be funding those. I hope it gets adopted. It also goes alongside moms obtaining majors. It's a grant program. If you choose to maintain that life, maintain that baby, and have it to term, Adoptive Streamline services are going to kick in. We're going to have adoptivestreamline.com or .gov rather, where you can actually get all of the resources you need: prenatal care, full cost coverage, working alongside the crisis pregnancy centers that are currently being targeted by Attorney General Ellison, and were just defunded last session by the DFL. Bringing those into the fold and having them work alongside in partnership with our government, that's gonna really save lives.
So let's not assume everybody knows definition of safe haven boxes, even though probably many do, but probably some don't. Please define what a safe haven box, what this is all about.
The inception of the idea started in Kansas. It was a box where people could anonymously place an infant that they wanted to dispose of. And we actually saw 2 weeks ago in the news in Minneapolis, in a homeless encampment, there was the remains of a baby found. That could have been a baby that was saved by one of these. So we have some funding that's hopefully going to be put in.
So by dispose of, you're now talking about what? A baby gets placed in a safe haven box, and what's happening?
It's insulated, it's cared for. It then also gives that information to local law enforcement, telling them that there's been a change in weight within the box, that there might be somebody in there, and they've saved hundreds of babies in states that have done it. So
it's a way to preserve the
life of a child.
Okay, excellent. Okay, there's time for 2 more questions before I get to these, right here, and then the lady back there. So go ahead, sir. Wait, get the microphone, please. Thank you.
This is for you, Representative Engman. And I'll preface this with, the schools are being run by people who are traffickers, who are groomers. In my state, in Wisconsin, it is teachers and librarians in the public schools are protected from child pornography laws. So a teacher showing pornography to children, it's educational.
That's true in Minnesota as well. Minnesota public schools are exempt from obscenity laws. I don't know if you know that or not.
Yeah, so that was going to be my question. If you're really concerned about this, that's got to be changed, and teachers have to be purged. My question was just simple. I was just looking for an answer. What's the law in Minnesota?
So comprehensive sex education is the law of the land here in the state of Minnesota, and it's now being mandated that there's teachings to the teachers before they can even obtain a license, talking about gender ideology and basically trying to entrap the human mind of somebody that's naive and young. Because if you can convince them to deny their own gender, something as basic as that at the age of 6, you have them hook, line, and sinker believing whatever in the hell you want for the rest of their life. That's why they're doing this. This is a form of Marxist ideology. But in our schools, there's a lot of good teachers, but they're forcing them out. They're forcing them out with all this nonsense. There's a grooming bill that I actually just authored last week that would 30 years, $15,000, that's minimum for grooming. And take a look at the definition on my most recent posts or any social media platform. It explains a lot of what you just said.
A really good book to maybe pick up on this would be by Dr. James Lindsay, called The Marxification of Education. Pick that one up. Okay, last question, this lady over here, and then I'm going to handle these 4. And I'm watching the clock, but we're good.
Right.
So go ahead.
So I wanted to say good job on, your efforts anyway, for HF 1655. That was a whole roller coaster of things, but you put up a good fight. And so I've talked to the Washington County Sheriff about some of our local trafficking, and he kind of highlighted a thing that I think you guys probably know about it and maybe would be important to tell these kids here in this room. But explaining how kids, right, because I would imagine everyone in this room is like, no, I'm not going to be trafficked. I'm not down with any of that. I wouldn't do it. Can you explain how kids who don't intend to be trafficked, don't want to be trafficked, get stuck in that cycle and the trap that they end up falling in, and how they stay there? And then the other part is, I think it would be good if we could highlight some of these awful abortion for all laws that have passed in Minnesota, and how that basically just enables trafficking in Minnesota and actually kind of spikes up the traffic to Minnesota for the reason, kind of along the lines, there's no parent involvement, there's no reporting, and it actually draws people in from other states to have, willy-nilly abortions, and nobody is caring who that person is who's having one. All right, and thank you for being here. You guys are great.
So in HF1, they removed the parental notification requirements. So if a 12-year-old who is potentially assaulted wants to have an abortion and they go to a Planned Parenthood, they don't have to call mom and dad. So the issue isn't being quelled there. The second one is the duty for the abortion provider, in this case, to report to the police if they believe that there is a victim who is seeking services because of human trafficking. They removed that. Now, why? Because it's a liability on their end. They don't want that liability, and they don't want to have to fork over this if they don't do it. They just want the perpetual client. They want you to have your punch card, keep coming back. That's what's going on here in the state of Minnesota. And even people who are pro-choice by their own definition, when they hear that, they're disgusted. This is what the left stands for. It is not healthcare. It is not a human right. It is killing, and they're not providing the alternative, women's life care centers. They're literally trying to kill them. So it's really sad. But I'll kick over the human trafficking piece.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest myths that are still out there is, how does trafficking start? Like, how does a teenager or, a college student become in a life of trafficking? And it's less than 10% is by a kidnapping, 90% is from that grooming. But our awareness that has gone out over the decades has been a lot of stranger danger, which is not the case with trafficking. It's the people that you know or that you think you know. It happens in the context of a relationship, and we use this word grooming, and even that comes with an idea. Like, what does grooming look like? It looks like the creepy guy with the candy and, creeps out of nowhere and, all kinds of things we think of. And the reality is, this is a cousin, this is somebody's brother, this is somebody's sister, this is somebody's aunt, this is a person in a position of authority in your community, and they set their eyes and their target on a particular young person. And the best way to gain relationship is to identify what are your biggest needs. So grooming, by definition, is actually a calculated series of words and actions intended to disarm you, to build trust and an emotional connection. Well, how can I do that? So if I notice that maybe you're alone a lot, or on your social media you say things like, I'm depressed or alone, or feeling, I want out of here, like my mom, my parents don't understand me, like all the emotions and all the things that, we feel at any given time through our life. And the problem is, putting it on social media, you're sharing that with the people that care about you, and then you're sharing that with a bunch of people that don't. And then those normal human needs suddenly become a vulnerability. And then as a person with bad intentions toward you, I use those needs and vulnerabilities to exploit them, and it begins with feeding those needs. Nobody, like when people say, I'm going to teach my kid karate because I want them to defend themselves against trafficking. And I'm like, well, they're not going to throat kick and, throat punch their boyfriend. And they're not going to body slam their grandpa. So like, this karate is, should be learned, by the way. I mean, self-defense is amazing. But this is a relationship that is caring for you, loving you, being affectionate, giving gifts. If you need a place to stay, I got you. If you feel alone, I'm always going to invite you. If you don't feel like, if your self-esteem is low, I'm going to tell you how beautiful and smart and wonderful you are. You're my favorite student in class. You're my favorite student on the team. You're my favorite friend at school. You make me feel all these great things, and I pick you up in cars, and I spend a lot of money on you, and next thing you know, you're in a relationship. Next thing you know, you've got a lot of love and a lot of connection, and then all of a sudden, it's just kind of, not okay to hang out with your other friends as much. Like, don't you want to hang out with me? Don't you like me? I thought we were cool. We are, but this is my best friend, and we always do this every year. Well, what do I mean to you? And then this isolation starts taking place, and then there's this introduction to abuse, exploitation, trafficking. And then once somebody has experienced that first abuse, or been trafficked in a hotel room, or had that sexual assault occur, then the shame, or you shouldn't be ashamed of it, but that's when their voice begins to say shame, and it's your fault, your problem, you're the prostitute, nobody cares about you. If you tell anybody, then I'm going to hurt your siblings, hurt your mom, hurt your dad, your dog. That's when all the threats and all the violence starts. So it's this progression that we are not expecting, that we're not looking for. It's much like the power and control wheel of domestic violence and abuse. So it's a very slow but calculated process that unfolds rather than all of a sudden does something to us shocking. And so it's the progression. And so that's why prevention looks like, what are the red flags of unhealthy relationships? That's what trafficking prevention looks like putting boundaries and control and conditions on the relationship, not letting me see my family or friends anymore. It's all those red flags of control and abuse that are those first stages leading into the exploitation.
Okay. 4 kind of, I think these will be relatively quick. And then what we'll do is when we're done with these 4, I'm going to close it in prayer. And if the live streaming has not stopped, we're going to cut off the live streaming, and I'll give you 2 short bits of instructions that we just don't want to have live streamed. Fair enough? Okay. So this one is for Clara. Okay. Clara, how can I, as someone who has not had an abortion, make the church a safe place for those who have had an abortion? How do I do that?
That's a great question. I don't know if there's a answer that fits a generic. I think that kind of comes by the situation. I think the biggest thing is take the example that Jesus had. I think of a verse that kind of has come to mind a lot in this past year and a half is when the woman caught in adultery is brought to Jesus. The Pharisees brought her up and said, hey, look at this woman's been committing a sin. And Jesus had every opportunity to say, yep, she's committing a sin. She's a sinner. Yada, yada, etc. But, we know that verse of let the one who is without sin cast the first stone. I think as Christians, we can kind of elevate ourselves to cast the stone, and that is not our place. Our place is to extend that compassion and grace, to be that listening ear. That question about, what do we do when, this last question, I was just kind of thinking what my answer might have been. And from a more biblical standpoint, the enemy is kind of using the tactics that we should be using against us. We need to be that loving place, that caring place, that place that is providing true safety, and not just a perceived perception of safety. How to do that, I don't know if I have the answer. That's a tough one. But I think it just starts with asking, what would I do in that situation? If I was in that situation, how would I want people to respond to me? How would I want Jesus to respond to me? That should be our response. Our first response is, you know what, it's not my place to cast that stone, because then I have to look at the log in my own eye. So that's kind of my response to that question.
Let me give you a pastoral answer to that too. As someone who served in a number of churches, large and small, Ephesians chapter 4 tells us God gave gifts to the church. Some are called to be apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. These gifts are people. We're not talking about Old Testament offices or New Testament offices. We're talking about people who've been given particular giftings. And it says in Ephesians 4:11-16 that the primary use of those giftings is to equip the saints to do the work of ministry. So the job of the pastor is not to do the ministry. The job of the pastor is to equip you to do the ministry. And thank you. So I was, my pastor who mentored me early on said, Dale, you're going to have people coming in your church and they're going to ask questions like this. How do I do this? How can I make the church a safe place for those? It sounds like God is stirring something in you that is causing you to say, how can I be involved in a ministry that can make my church a safe place? Here would be a pastoral answer. Go minister. Talk to your pastor and say, Pastor, we've got some people in this church. I want to start ministering to them here. And the pastor should say, go for it. Let me know what resources you need and we will help you do the ministry. So if God is bubbling that or any other kind of ministry in you, go do it. Okay? That's a real simple, quick answer that could take a lot more time that we don't have. This one was really hard to read, and I'm not sure I'm going to get it. What is the most effective way to take a stand and stand against, in different sectors of society? I just can't read the stand against what. And what are the opportunities to sign, have legislation support? So just how do we take a stand? Where do I go get involved? What's a good first step of action, perhaps? Okay, one is get to work with Act United, because they need teams. 2 would be get involved in a community action team with Restore Minnesota. See me later on. Elliot, what about legislation? What do people who don't write legislation need to do for somebody who does write legislation?
I'd say there's a machine right now that's upholding a government that isn't working for you guys. You guys see it. It's being funded with your own tax dollars. I mean, seriously, I've seen legislators write bills that fund a nonprofit that their brother created a week in the past for $90 million, and then that nonprofit just writes a check to the campaign of the other brother that wrote the bill. It's literally a pyramid scheme. What you can do to uproot that is call or text or email or get a hold of a representative that you either want to support or find a candidate that you want to support against another. And go knock doors, go talk to people, go phone bank, be a voice, because there are others that are like you that need a place to go, and you can find them and say, hey, come alongside me, let's go door knock for an hour. You know, that would be incredible. You know how many minds you could change in an hour of just straight up door knocking? You just got to do it. It's tough to start. Your first door, I still remember it. It was very shaky. It was weird. It felt odd. But then you get into a rhythm and it's kind of addictive. And that's how I got to 60-some thousand. So, yeah, give it a try, guys. Be bold, but reach out to somebody and help them out.
Sweet. And Clara, that same kind of question for you. You're working in a crisis kind of a center. So, can you use more volunteers? Oh yeah. Could more crisis pregnancy centers or women's centers around the state use more volunteers?
Certainly, yep.
Okay, there you go. The answer's not tough. It's just a matter of what's God call on you. Okay? All right. I'm going to handle these 2 real quickly. How can we get more church leaders to speak about government involvement? Here's the unfortunate statistic. You can go to frc.org, Family Research Council. It uses George Barna's data. About 75% of church population in the United States are wanting their pastors to speak more about these kind of issues. People are asking their pastors to address our cultural issues of the day. They're asking them to know, what does the Bible have to say about abortion, about traffic? What does the scripture have to say? Over 75% are asking it, and only 14% of pastors are willing to take it on. It is disgusting, because here's the issue. Too many pastors think that we're trying to make them political. I get that all the time, that, Dale, I don't do politics. I'm so tired of dirty politics. And I say, so the government is the one part of society that doesn't need Jesus? And it stuns them, because they forget that of the 3 institutions God created, government is one of them. And what they're advocating is to remove the voice of God from our government, and then we get what we got. A broken system, which wraps up with this last one. Someone says, let's call it pro-death instead of pro-choice. Look, if you really want to stun somebody, all right? Everybody in this room, you ready? You're all pro-choice. Every one of you is pro-choice. You're either pro-life or pro-death. Those are the only 2 choices. But you've got to be willing to not let the pro-choice crowd steal the nice language. They're really good at that, and they weaponize it. And then they do this thing now called lawfare. Okay, look, it's time for us to do things like take the rainbow back. It's time for us to do things like stand up and say, no, you are promoting a culture of death. The number 1 bill that they're going to try to push down our throats starting next week is physician-assisted suicide. Think about it. They want to kill them while they're in the womb. They want to kill us on the other end because we're not productive enough for them. They want to depopulate because they don't like certain things. Folks, this is a spiritual battle. It's been said from up front. But it's fought in the physical. So thank you three for being willing to be on the front lines. Okay, thank you for that. Okay. And you and I will be at it starting on Monday. Amen. So is the live stream off? I'm going to close in prayer, and then when I'm done in prayer, we'll just make sure the live stream's off. Father, thank you very much for this time where Clara, Jessica, and Elliot are willing to come and open up their hearts and minds to help us get our hearts and minds open to what biblical truth looks like.